Morning came, 5:30 a.m., and Alan was up, showered and shaved, dressed in his uniform, and began preparing breakfast. Vivian came out, having knocked on the agent's doors, to help in her housecoat and slippers. Vivian told Flo to use the bathroom in the master bedroom and Donald to use the shared bathroom, just so as not to slow things down. About 6 a.m. Alan shouted, "Breakfast, everyone." The four gathered around the table. Alan grabbed Vivian and Flo's hands and nodded to Don, who was a little taken aback, but Vivian and Flo grabbed his hands. Alan bowed his head and thanked the Lord for their guests, the meal, and the day. Then he passed around the hotcakes, bacon, and eggs. After the meal, Flo went off to dress, and Alan went out to find the morning paper. Vivian and Agent Camp sat for a few minutes, and then Vi started to her bedroom, but Agent Camp reached out and put his hand on Vi's bottom. Vivian turned, smiling, reached back and put the agent into Jane's gentle, loving touch, or the Vulcan nerve pinch, whichever you prefer, and the agent collapsed to the floor. Vivian stood over him and said, "There's only one man on God's green earth who is allowed to touch that part of my anatomy, and his name is Alan Smith. I'll tell you like Jane and Amber would tell the truckers when they got a little handsy, you'd look swell in an orange jumpsuit. Sheriff Murdoch will make you a guest in his jail for sexual harassment if you ever try that in his county again. Get my drift? I believe that you had better find different accommodations for the remainder of your stay in Mountain View County. Flo may remain as our guest, but you've worn out your welcome." Agent Camp stood, rubbing his shoulder. "Please forgive me. I will get a room in the motel. I can't apologize enough. I hope we can still work together on this case." Vivian replied, "You will be working with Captain Smith and Sergeant Clark. And you had better be on your best behavior because Amber Clark could put you in traction in a moment." About that time, Flo came down ready for work, and Alan brought in the paper. Agent Camp told Alan that he appreciated the hospitality, but it might be better for him to find other accommodations. Flo could stay if she wanted. Alan only nodded assent as everyone left for work. At the CSI lab, the quartet began to examine the clothing found by Charlie 7 the evening before. The purse provided one artifact, a receipt from a motel in Jefferson County. Agent Camp suggested that he and Agent Kildare go to check it out. Still, Alan said he and Don should do that, and Flo, Amber, and Charlie 7 go back to where the clothing was found and search the area more thoroughly. Agent Camp said, "But it's in another county." Alan replied, "Because of the CSI lab being shared with the 6 counties around Mountain View County, Amber and I have been deputized in all 7 counties. We do have jurisdiction there." Agent Camp responded, "Well, what do you think, ladies?" Amber and Flo replied, "Let's do it." Amber called Sheriff Murdoch and asked for Charlie 7 to help and guide the search. The sheriff called Charlie 7 to assist Amber and Flo. The team of Flo, Amber, Ty, and Vi walked the bar ditch the length of County Road 86. In their search, they found a wallet with Lisa Vito's driver's license, credit cards, and receipts from motels and hotels from Birmingham to Mountain View. They also found a small overnight bag containing clothing and letters. Alan and Agent Camp drove to Jefferson County and the Bidawee Motel. Alan and Don entered the motel's office, and the desk clerk looked up, smiling, "Captain Smith. To what do we owe the honor of this visit?" Alan replied, "Murder. Stan, this is FBI Agent Donald Camp. Don, this is Stan Lee, the Stan Lee of Bidawee Motel fame. He and his wife own and operate this establishment. Stan, how's Anita?" Stan replied, "She gets up every morning with the dry heaves." Alan smiled, "I just got over them." "Congratulations." Stan smiled, "Vivian's in a family way too?" Agent Camp seemed a little impatient, but Alan said, "Don, relax. Stan here has had some VIPs here. Tell him about your namesake Stan." Stan replied, "Yeah, we've had Marvel Stan Lee here a couple of days every year for the last 7. Agent Camp started, "Captain America Stan Lee?" Stan nodded, "Yeah, Spider-Man Stan Lee. He's a great guy, stays a couple of days, visits with Anita and me, leaves us a couple of comic books and a pretty big tip." "Well, Alan, Agent Camp, how can we help?" Alan took out a photograph of Lisa Vito and showed it to Stan. "Ever seen this young lady?" Stan whistled, "Yeah, She has a room here. Ain't seen her for a couple of days, but she prepaid, so we've not disturbed it. She the victim? Agent Camp replied, yeah. May we see her room? Please. Stan said, right this way guys. And he led them to room 6. The room looked like a tornado had gone through it when they entered. Don said, to express a ridiculous observation, someone was looking for something. An elderly gentleman stuck his head in the door about that time. Hey! You guys the cops? Alan looked around. Yeah, we're the cops. Why? The man replied, I heard loud banging in this room last night. When I banged on the wall and yelled, whoever was in here ran off. There were 2 of them. They ran out and drove away in a red Corvette. Alan responded, get a look at them? To which the old man replied, nah. Too dark. But one looked black, maybe an Indian. Stan remarked, that girl drove a red Corvette. But I ain't seen it for a couple of days. Hey! She wrote down the license plate number on her registration card. Make and year of her car, want it? Alan and the agent replied, yeah, we'd at least like a copy. Stan brought them a copy while Don and Alan searched the room. They found a snub-nosed .38, a notebook, and a telegram in the room. The .38 had its serial number filed off and 3 live rounds and 3 shell casings. The notebook appeared to be a diary of sorts. Each day was recorded as to travel progress, meals, places seen, and people she had talked to. The gist of the conversations were recorded under the individual's name. The telegram was sent to Lisa Vito and said, Lisa, need your special kind of help. I'll pay expenses, plus. Dad. Under all of her clothing, Alan found a private detective's license from San Francisco. The license included an address in the San Francisco business district. Alan showed the license to Agent Camp and said they should ask the San Francisco Police Department to check it out. Agent Camp said that he could call in the local FBI office. Alan and Don searched the room thoroughly and found nothing else of significance. They thanked Stan and told him the room was his. By then, it was lunchtime. The 2 entered the motel dining room and sat. A pretty young lady took their order and began to walk to the kitchen when a middle-aged trucker pinched the waitress on her bottom. Alan stood and shouted, don't manhandle the waitress. The trucker snapped around, saw Alan, and flipped him the bird. Alan walked over to the man and slapped him, meet me outside. The man replied, not with that badge on. Alan took the badge off his shirt and stuck it in his pocket, now, outside. The trucker stood, walked out, ran to his truck, and drove off. Alan went back to his table, pinning his badge back on. The young waitress brought their meals to the table, and she whispered, thank you. I wish our county deputies would stand up for us like you just did. Alan walked to a wall phone and dialed, this is Captain Smith of the Mountain View County Sheriff's Department. May I speak to the sheriff? A half hour later, the Jefferson County Sheriff entered the cafe, walked to Alan's table, and sat. Alan and the sheriff shook hands, and introductions were made with Agent Camp. The sheriff asked, what's going on, Alan? Alan responded, you've got a lot of truckers eating here every day. That pretty young waitress was accosted by one of them. We used to have that problem in our county truck stop until Sheriff Murdoch started having one unit take 7 at the truck stop. It took a while and a few altercations before that stuff was stopped. I don't want to tell you how to run your department, but these young ladies need protection. They are your daughters. The sheriff looked at their waitress, is there a problem here? She replied, yes sir. The sheriff turned back to Alan, thanks Alan, you have got a good idea there, Alan said, you need to get your regular customers to stand up to this kind of harassment. Once they're on board, things should improve. Agent Camp looked at Alan, you really care, don't you? Alan just nodded his head. The sheriff stood and addressed Agent Camp. Captain Smith is one of the most caring cops in the state, if not the whole country. Thanks Alan. After their lunch, Alan and Don returned to the Mountain View CSI lab and met the other team. Agent Camp told the team about their lunch in Jefferson County and their meeting with the sheriff. The sheriff said that Alan is the most caring cop in the country. Vivian grabbed Alan, smiling. She said, I know he is. We told you our story last night. Alan just blushed and kissed his wife. The two teams assessed what evidence they had and began to process the artifacts. As they worked, a phone call came. Sheriff Murdoch reported that the state police had found the red Corvette abandoned in a rest stop along the interstate. Sheriff Murdoch said that he would send a tow truck to bring the car to the sheriff's motor pool. Amber said, "Vi, let's you and me go with the tow truck. Just to ensure the car is as unspotted as possible." Vivian jumped up, smiling, "Okay." Amber and Vivian were off on their adventure. Alan, Don, Flo, and Ty began examining the artifacts that were in the lab, attempting to discover anything usable. They could track Lisa's movements from Birmingham to Mountain View using the motel receipts. The track took some unusual turns and backtracks. Ty looked at the track. Was she following someone that was attempting to lose her? Alan remembered her notebook and began to correlate the notes with the dates and stops she had made. Alan turned to Agent Camp. "What do you think? Could various FBI offices investigate these stops? Looking for common names on various registers, even from other motels and hotels?" Don thought, "Let me call my headquarters and see. We should be able to get copies of registration entries from the field offices and assign analysts to make the connections." Agent Camp called the Bureau headquarters and outlined their idea. At the end of his conversation, he hung up and told Alan and Ty that they would be getting copies of the registration pages. But the Bureau would assign several analysts to track down common names, places, and dates. Alan called Stan at the Bidawee Motel. "Stan, you been in room 6 yet?" Stan replied, "Not yet, why?" Alan replied, "Don't. I need to get back there and dust for prints." Stan replied, "Okay." Alan checked his watch. "Our girls will be ours. I'm going back to Jefferson County and dust that motel room." Agent Camp said, "I need to book a room at the motel. Flo, I'll meet you at the truck stop at about 5 for dinner." Flo nodded okay. Ty said that he would stay and answer the phone until quitting time. So, the group split up and went about their duties. Alan got Stan to open room 6, and he went about dusting and collecting fingerprints. During his time in the room, nature called, so he went into the bathroom and noticed what looked like rust stains on the grout between the tiles on the floor. Using the ALS, alternate light source, he determined that the rust stains were blood. He collected what he could, hoping there would be enough for analysis. As he left, Alan noticed it was dinner time and entered the cafe. The pretty young waitress saw him and ran over to take him to a table, and she took his order. As he sat there looking over the dining room, he noticed that 2 Jefferson County deputies sat at one table. Alan stood and saluted them, smiled, and gave them a thumbs up. The deputies grinned and returned the thumbs up sign. After the dinner hour, the deputies paid the bill, left a tip, and walked over to Alan. "Captain Smith, the sheriff took your suggestion to heart. Deputies will be taking 7 here 3 meals a day, 24/7. You were right, these young ladies are our daughters." One deputy pointed out the young lady who waited on Alan and said, "Your waitress is my daughter, Alyssa. She told me what you did this afternoon. Thanks." Alan smiled, "They're worth it. Your daughter is beautiful and seems appreciative and kind. Have a good evening." Alan paid his bill, left a $20 tip, and drove back to Mountain View. It was nearing 10 when he got home. The house was dark, and he began to worry, but Vivian arrived home just then. Alan took her in his arms, held her close, and kissed her. "Glad you're back, sweetheart." She kissed him and said, "So am I. That's a long trip." Alan asked, "Have you eaten?" To which she replied, "No. You?" He responded, "Yeah. Let's go to the truck stop and get you fed." The next morning, Amber and Vivian began to fingerprint the Corvette as Alan and Don processed the prints Alan had collected the evening before from room 6. Alan was called to Sheriff Murdoch's office. "Alan, we have a stack of fax sheets for you. I called the phone company. I want a fax installed in the CSI lab with a new number. Have Agent Camp tell his people to use the new fax number as soon as it is installed." Alan responded 10-4. He took the faxes to the lab and started sorting them out. Finally, he told Agent Camp about the new fax number being installed and that he needed to inform the Bureau. At about 10, the phone company representative arrived and installed the new fax. He told Alan that the new fax number was 30 MTVIEWL, Mountain View Lab 3688-4395. Agent Camp called his bureau headquarters and told them the new fax number. Ty, Flo, and Dawn began to examine the faxes to correlate the dates, times, locations, and names from the motel/hotel registration records. Alan began to process the fingerprints he had gotten from the motel room. Then Amber and Vivian returned and began to process the prints they had collected off the Corvette. Suddenly, Ty let out a laugh. "I found something." Alan and Dawn stepped over to him. "What did you find?" Ty exclaimed, "Look, there is one name that really stands out here, Michael Ironhorse. He is registered at every place that Lisa Vito stopped. See? Here? Here? And here?"